forgot. So we've pushed those guys back nicely till next month. The month that was by Ben is going to talk about log. It's going to Ken is going to, as I always say, about pizza. Probably only three of you who are wondering who I am. I'm Jesse, and I've been organising basically the logistics for Cocoaheads since August 2014. I've been coming since it started. I think it's Gareth. Did Gareth walk in? He's out the front still drinking wine. Gareth started it back in 2007 or something at the pub. Stay at the pub. I've been developing for iOS around the same time since 2009. I work at a little startup called Bean Hunter, and I'm on Twitter as well. So Cocoaheads has been around since July 2007. We're the second Thursday of every month except January. We have a monthly hack night that runs on the final Tuesday of the month, and Luke manages the hack night. This event is sponsored by the Melbourne community, so the beer and the pizza, it's free for you guys. It appears from someone pays for it. We have a couple of presentations, 2 to 3 a month, lightning talks, as I said, drinks and pizza. I've condensed this slide for those of you who come every month. If you want to learn more about Melbourne Cocoaheads, there's a page on the website that is called About that has lots of links. We're at Melbourne Coco on Twitter. I've kept the Slack line in here. Everyone seems to be on Slack. I think based on my notes, we've got 160 members in the Slack channel, so that's great. It's even got its own in-jokes now, the Slack channel. It's a really good little community. Even people from Sydney are allowed in the Melbourne Cocoaheads one. By special invitation. We don't kick you out if you move to Sydney, if you're from Melbourne. Again, another in-joke. We broadcast monthly on YouTube as well. So I've got a few gadgets up here, and it ends up on YouTube, and you can go back and watch it after the fact. I'm sure I can edit those YouTube videos after the fact, but I haven't done so yet. But there is links to that every month. And contributing to this group is via doing presentations, by even just turning up, taking photos, mentioning at Melbourne Coco on Twitter, asking and answering questions on the Slack channel or on the mailing list, or just here. Our sponsors tonight are Vinomofo. That's why we've got wine as half of the alcohol instead of beer, and I think this is the second time Vinomofo is sponsored, and last time it went off really well. I think at the end we gave away the bottles of wine that we didn't end up drinking. There was like one, I think. Luke from Vinomofo is running late, but his words to me were, enjoy the wine. Luke's been a long-time member of Cocoaheads. A lot of us have worked with him. He's at Vinomofo now, and it's great that he's put the challenge on the company to pony up the money, but they're all over it as well. So when you see Luke, he's got a lot of tattoos. Say hi. Our hosts are Team Square. I think Team Square now is basically known everywhere. They offer a trial. You can come and work out of here for a day for free. Who's working out of here today? I know. Yeah, there's increasing number of people working out of here every day. Smaller companies. It's a great space. They've got great Wi-Fi. Michael, who I don't think he's here at the moment, but he runs around during the day. They can always email them and say, "Oh, I go to Cocoaheads. Can I come and work for a day?" And they're super friendly. So that's here, and they're also on level 4, which I haven't been to yet. So that must be cooler than this place. But this is awesome. This venue's great. They've basically provided everything except my 2 laptops and my camera here, so they're super great. General business. I moonlight as a PHP developer, and PHP can make websites. iPhone developers at this stage can't make websites in iPhone. So the new website that I wrote earlier in the year, I added a form to it to submit talks. So if you're inspired, and everyone's seems to get inspired to do presentations the day of Cocoaheads, the evening of Cocoaheads, or the morning after Cocoaheads, and I always forget where people have contacted me. So cocoaheads.com or melbournecocoaheads.com/talks, go in there and fill out your details. It literally just sends me an email. Like, don't get stressed about it. It just sends me an email so I don't forget, and then I can go back to my email and go, oh, there it is. If you've got an idea for a talk, create a conversation with me through that. And yeah, the photo on there is the photo that I would have taken from here 5 minutes ago, and you're all in it. You're all in it. Lightning Talk month last year was May. I'm going to push that back to June this year. This is general business section. So there's already had a couple of people put their hands up for Lightning Talks. I think Andy has. But we're going to push that back to June. June, I think, is normally the WWDC month that normally gets pushed back. But I don't think we're going to push that back this year because I think that Dub is later. But to be... Dub's the 13th, is that...
I've been suggested to be in San Francisco in that week.
So would that Thursday be the second?
So that will be the second Thursday. Yeah, the second Thursday is on the 9th.
Okay, all right, so we...
The week before. Did you do it the week before?
No,
we do it the week after.
The week after is the 4th, if I'm adding up weeks.
Yeah.
It's the 4th. I'm not sure. We'll have to panel that one. I'll think about it. I've got in touch this month, hiring. Tom around. Another Tom. If your company is keen on hiring or saying that they're hiring, do you want to just put your hand up and you can stand up and say your name and your company and that you're hiring? I'll start, or maybe I'll start this side and go back. Chendo, do you want to start?
I'm Chendo. I started with your stuff called Docthing, which is a telehealth app thing. You can see doctors from your phone. It's Uber for doctors. Looking for someone who can do both Android and iOS. We're going to be rebuilding our stuff in no reasons.
Awesome, thanks Chendo. And yeah, down the back in the middle. Sorry, I don't know your name.
So I'm Alvaro from Code for Australia. We help companies to do and think differently. So from tomorrow, we're going to be hiring 12 people to join government for 12 months to basically disrupt the way that they're working. So your mission literally is go into a government agency, find the problem, build the solution, teach them a couple of stuff, come back to wherever you're working. So that's a 12-month thing. We're also looking for a CTO and CMO. So that's part of the core team.
What's CMO stand for? Just for my benefit. Marketing, right. Keep going down here. Yep. Yep.
I'm Paul from Australia. So basically what we're doing, we're connecting cars to mobile phones. Also we are collecting traffic across Australia and provide this traffic information to everyone in Australia. And currently we're having a couple of good steps.
Awesome. And from Tom, who sent me a message before, Tom's from Redbubble, and they're looking for a senior, top-tier iOS developer as well. That's Redbubble. Oh, and come on, Ashton.
Ashton from Odyssey, hiring senior iOS developer.
Awesome. All right, so there's lots going on. All those people that spoke, then hang around during the pizza break, and people can come and grab you. Quite often, you guys run away before everyone up here stops talking. Presentations tonight. We're going to start with my mark slide. Ben, you're up first with the month it was. The Apple TV is in the living room. This one. It's the living room. I don't know what the other one is.
Living room two.
The weird thing is mine's called living room, I also at home, so I was like, how is it picking it up?
Yeah, this is from my home. It didn't come very far.
Do I need to use that?
Yes.
Hi. You all know me by now probably, but if you don't, I'm Ben. And I do the month that was alternating with Jesse and Pete. And if you don't know them, they'll be around. Jesse's the guy that was just talking. I don't think Pete's here tonight. No. So I'm going to open with a brief and extremely short summary of the FBI versus Apple debacle. And I know you're not going to read that. So that is an appropriate reaction. So FBI wanted a thing, Apple said no. Like all Americans, the FBI went to the courts and tried to make them do the thing. Still said no. And it's not over. There's like apparently 200, 300, 400 more requests landing at the FBI for them to do the thing. It's not going to end. And I found this really interesting as well. I'm going to move. Yeah. That was pretty funny. It was pretty extreme. I was reading the tweets, just having a good cackle. I'm like, oh, humanity. And people blamed Microsoft for breaking the mirror they showed to humanity. Just went, wow, you really screwed up this mirror, guys. What's wrong with your bot? No, it's not. It learnt what people were writing on Twitter. That's why I've stopped using Twitter, almost. And for the good stuff, we had iOS 9.3, which was like, yes, smoothness on my iPhone 6s Plus. It doesn't lag when I use 3D Touch, and I still can't delete an app. But then Safari forgot to open URLs, and I don't think they're important at all, but then Apple thought it was, so they released 9.31. And apparently it was the, the Booking.com website that broke everything. They fixed their stuff, and then Apple had to come in and do this as well to restore people's thing. Not sure how I feel about this one. It's smaller, and I'm like, for years people were going, Apple, make a bigger screen, and then they release a smaller one because when they did that, people wanted a smaller one again. Guess, is it?
I bought it for my partner to go play around with a lot. It's really, really fast. It's really good.
It's because it doesn't have to render 3 times pixels, right? Yeah. And it doesn't have 3D touch either? No, useless.
But it's got the iPhone 6s camera, so it takes amazing shots.
Yeah, but without 3D touch, how can you quickly take a selfie from the home screen? Like, and then they did this as well. I'm happy because the iPad Pro is enormous, and I saw somebody taking a selfie with one in the street, and I almost wanted to smack them. I was like, no, it's like doing this. It's like, it was ridiculous. So, and then we had Swift 2.2, and apparently there's an Android pull request, but I put it in small font. It's been merged, and I heard from somebody before, and I can't see him. You? Yes. Sorry, what was your name again? Luke. That it apparently just allows you to compile, and I was thinking it was like full UI kit, jumping in there, making a superior app for Android, but shame. And you can apparently pull shit like this on Windows as well now. And if you don't read Bash, that makes a folder that you can't touch. So, yeah, Bash is on Windows. I don't know when that's actually happening or if it's actually available now. I just couldn't be bothered reading the full article on 9 to 5. But
It's available on the App Store or the Windows Store.
the Windows Store. It's not the App Store, it's the Windows Store. It's a Windows App Store, and they're not even apps. They're made with HTML5, right? Usually, yeah. And then this happened, which I'm happy about because Alien Blue is a cool app, and then entirely unrelated news, Apple pulled down all the old ones that were there. So there's a bunch of devs everywhere like, no, why? That's because it was not safe for work content. Not sure what the official one's going to have, but considering it's Reddit, but anyway. And now we have a new segment that I put in here because I didn't know what to call this slide. congrats to Vino Mofo on their funding, and I don't know whether they're here. You see, I thought there was like heaps of wine because that, but no, I'd say my theory was debunked. There could be more. There could be more, but oh well, there isn't. But there's enough to get, you know. And then we had Vlas schooling someone on UIKit, and then Chris Miles apparently confirmed it. I was skimming through the Slack, and he's like, "Yeah, you're right." And someone was just like, "Hey, I'm going to make a Vlas signal." Sorry. And then from the rumour mills, thinner Apple Watch apparently coming to Dub Dub. I was reading the annual rumour roundup on 9 to 5 and Mac Rumours, and again I'm shocked at the thoughts that iPhone 7 may be thinner. I'm a little bit shocked by that. Don't know why. And USB-C with no headphone jack. I really hope they don't do the latter. And there's a new design apparently for the iPhone 7. Again, a surprise. Like, really? And then Johnny Ive's still sad because they're still not thin enough. And things that Melbourne shipped. And I posted in the Slack using the, like, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Touchy at here command. And nobody responded, so put your hands up if you shipped something, otherwise that staring emoji is gonna, like, I couldn't find an evil eye one. So, yeah.
Yeah, we recently shipped, basically 3 days ago, a new app called Kubo. It's trying to take on the fitness industry and break away from the gym so that people can find personal trainers without having to go to the gym and sign up for a long contract. So it's going to be pretty awesome. It's doing a soft launch at the moment, but definitely check it out if you got a second.
So it's beautiful personal trainers.
Oh, God. I tried so hard not to say that. Yeah. Not in Cordova, though.
That's always a positive. Is it native?
Yes,
Good. That's good.
Kubo, Kubo.
So I'm going to Google for Kubo. No. Anything else? Like anything, even an Android app. I'll take an Android app. No. That'll do. Even, oh, what was it? Was it an update to Bean Hunter? Yeah.
When's the next Bean Hunter shipping?
We're really close. It might be shipping next, like by next month. It might be shipped. I just want to work ahead of us with 2.3.
Did you not pay attention to Swift 2.2? Like,
Whatever we're at.
yeah. So there was a Windows Phone app, you said, Matt? A Windows Phone? No, but like, really? You got my hopes up. I used Windows Phone for a year and a half. Jesus, you can't joke like that. Like, anyway, that's it. Evil Eye will watch you all, so release an app for next month. Otherwise, Melbourne's...
Thanks, Ben. So, we'll jump straight into the presentation. There's probably a couple of minutes if you need a wine refresh or a beer refresh. So don't hesitate now to jump out. But Gio's up next. And then Andy, you're after Gio. And then hopefully we can eat at that stage. You gotta jump off get out of the living room.
This is not living room 2.
I can be. There's only one that.
Oh, there you go.
I think you've done it before. You can either use that or do whatever.
Hi guys. Give me a sec for the setup. Whoop. All right. So I'm using some fancy tech. So this is my screen mirrored. I don't want that. Separate display. Yep. No. This is still the same. Quack, quack. It dropped. Cool. I want this one here. Then I want this one over here, and I want to go full screen. Full screen. All right. Cool. So, hi everyone. I hope you're good. And tonight I'd like to talk with you about Italian food, and so a very good example of Italian food, one of my favorite kind of pasta is the spaghetti. So lovely, you know, fun to eat, and they get up the sauce so nicely. But when it comes to software development, they're not that good, are they? So spaghetti code is that super tangled code that is, you know, you really don't know where to start. Everything depends on everything else, and you just want to run away and do something else. Well, unfortunately, like Jackie showed us last month, spaghetti code kind of happens just because of entropy. Your software is going to turn in spaghetti code given enough time and people working on it. But there's something that we can do to mitigate the effect and to, you know, untangle the spaghetti in an easier way. And that brings us to our next Italian food, which is the lasagna. So good as well, you know, in the oven, so cheesy and with the ragu, delicious. So software that looks like a lasagna kind of looks like this. There's a lot of layers, and that's the keyword. Each layer can interact only with the layer on top of it and the layer below. And each layer introduces an ever-growing level of abstraction, so that when you are at the top layer, you only worry about the domain logic, the domain space of your application. And when you are in the lower layers, you just worry about the implementation of how to, you know, deal with the database or the network or whatever else. And if our layers and our, you know, objects inside the layers grow out of control, we get into another kind of Italian food, which is the ravioli. Ravioli code can be very good, but when, you know, your ravioli plate is just too big, I don't know, it kind of gets hard to manage. And finally, last but not least, I love pizza. And tonight, and hopefully, you know, talk about pizza, and the pizza is going to arrive. Well, tonight I'd like to, you know, show you how we maybe can write software that looks like a pizza. But back to the lasagna. So if we talked about, you know, the fact that lasagna has layers and abstractions and self-contained. So from the consumer point of view, if you are a developer and you need to use a piece of software that is structured like a lasagna, or if you know, are another piece of software inside the lasagna that needs to use APIs, that's pretty cool, because everything is just in one place. There's these layers of abstraction, so when you are up there, you can only worry about the domain space, and you don't worry about the fact that, like, your data goes into a core database against a real one. Doesn't matter, because there's layers of abstraction. And that's pretty cool. But if we look at the lasagna from the unit test point of view, and I would like to say that we might not agree that tests are useful, what's the best way to test, TDD, BDD, no DD. But if your code is easy to test, it is very likely that it's going to be easy to use. So I think that we can all agree on to that. Well, if you try to write unit tests for one of the objects in a top layer of the lasagna, you can't just get an instance of the object. You need to provide it with all its dependencies. But to get one of the dependency of the layer just below, you need to get the dependency on the layer below it, and so on and so forth. And this results into you having to, you know, provide the whole dependency tree to your objects when you try to test them. And this is a bit annoying, because you're going to end up with tests that are long to write, and it's annoying to have to set up all this kind of stuff. There's also another issue with the lasagna, which is the side effects. You do something in the top layer, and it's fine to do it from the code, because you say, hey, just put this data into the storage. But if you want to make sure that that data actually went into the storage, you need to, go and look into the storage to make sure that it's there. And that is not super easy to do in the unit test, because you don't have a lot of visibility in the layers that are below the one that you are accessing right now. So the lasagna is awesome from the developer point of view, but when you're trying to test, it has some problems. So how can we mitigate this? How can we write better tests? Well, an idea would be to use stubs and mocks. And what are these guys? What do these words mean? Well, a stub is a test double, a duplicate of one of the dependencies of the piece of code, the object that you're trying to test. And the purpose of a stub is to control the indirect inputs that the system under test is receiving. So what you can do is, instead of providing the whole dependency tree to your object that you're trying to test, you can create a fake one that represents only the first layer. And because you created it, you have the control on all the values that it's going to spit out, all the inputs that it's going to provide to the system under test. And that gives you, all the control in the test, and you don't need to instantiate all the objects. This makes the instantiation part of your test smaller and more controllable. The other ones, the mocks, well, a mocks is again a test double, and its purpose is to control the indirect outputs that a system under test produce. And we can use mocks to verify a side effect. So instead of provide like a real object for this kind of dependency where something happens, you can provide a mock. And you just say, hey, mock, make sure that this method, like store stuff in the database, is gonna be called. And if it's not called, if the top level object doesn't call that method, well, the test is gonna fail, and you know that there's some problem. So mocks and stubs can help us write better tests, shorter tests at least, tests in which you have more control for code that looks like a lasagna. But is this a good idea? Is it actually, is it useful to have mocks and stubs? Well, my opinion, and the opinion of people smarter than me, of which I read the blog post and looked at the talks, is no, that's not a good idea, because mocks that. Well, if you think about it, it's quite simple, because mocks and stubs are not production code. Simple. If you use stubs and mocks, you're running your test through code that is not the real code that your application is going to run, because you just created that object just for the purpose of the test. And you're going to end up like younger me that had this shiny green suite of unit tests, everything was passing, and then the app crashed in production. Why? Because I had stubbed my network client and I was providing fake data to my application. So my tests were green because I had, stubbed the network client with a piece of code that I had written and just returned the values that I wanted. But then there's some tape here and I keep getting stuck into it. But then the real code, the application code, had a bug into, managing NS dictionaries, whatever, and it crashed, and I looked like a fool. Well, so mocks and stubs, they're not production code, they're not the code that your app is going to run when it's actually used. So they don't give you that real confidence on the code that you're testing. And on top of that, is it actually, are we actually testing stuff in the right way? If you look at a piece of code like this, a function called sum that gets two integers and sums them and returns you the result. How would you test this one? Would you mock the method plus and make sure that when you call sum, the method plus is called? Or would you simply say, hey, I'm expecting that if I sum 1 and 2, the result is 3? Well, I would rather go for the latter approach because it's simpler, it doesn't care about the implementation of our sum function. I tried to come up with an example of how to sum two numbers without using the plus. I couldn't do it, but I'm sure that there's a way to do it, and if you were to use a mock with the plus and then change the implementation removing the plus, your test would fail, but the result would still be correct. So what mock and stub do is that they're testing the wrong thing. They're testing the implementation, what methods you're calling, rather than the behavior of your code. What are the results that your code produces? So obviously, I sound very smart, but I'm not. Most of this stuff I learned from into, learning more about the problem of stubs and mocks and how to, be in a world where there's no such things. I really recommend you check out the work of Ken Scambler, in particular the blog post "To Kill a Mocking Test" and his talk "Mocks and Stubs." I'll share the links somehow, sometime. So back again to our lesson in school, but it's sort of make you write code that ends up having a lot of dependencies because of all the layers stacked one on top of the other, and it relies a lot on side effects because you do stuff at the top layers, but the actual effects are below. Well, another great thinker that I really respect, Gary Bernard, gave a super interesting talk called Boundaries that I had to watch something like 4 times to actually understand. And he goes through a similar path, and he says, well, how can we write code that doesn't have these problems that our battle-tested lasagna architecture introduces? Well, what he proposes is to shift the focus of our code from the objects and how objects interact with each other to the values that objects can send one to the other, and these values are what our actual business logic is all about. So if we go back to our sum function, this sum function has some values as input, integers in this case, and returns a value as its output, which happens to be another integer. And this function is pretty cool because it has some inputs and returns some outputs. It doesn't change any state inside. It doesn't hit network or database. It doesn't have any side effect. Code like this is super easy to test. You say, hey, these are your 2 inputs, and this is the output that I expect. Is that the case? Yeah, my implementation is correct. Functions that look like this one are called pure function. And this is, like a very hip word right now with all the functional programming trendiness. A pure function is just a function in the mathematical sense. We need to call them pure because we can have functions that are not mathematical in our day-to-day code. And the cool thing about this function here is, again, they don't mutate any state, they don't change stuff in memory, and they don't read any input from the disk or whatever, and they don't generate any output to the screen or to the database or to the network. And it would be very awesome if we could write all our application using this kind of function because they're super easy to test. If our code is easy to test, it's easy to work with, and our apps are pretty good. But we still need to do input-output, right? We still need to get data from the network, and we still need to print it on the screen. So how can we do that? Well, a way to get closer to a world where we have more pure function in our code is to try to separate the code that takes decision from the code that takes action. What does this mean? Well, let me give you an example. Say that we have this very mundane task that I'm sure everyone has to deal with sooner or later. Insert an object into the database if condition. For example, if the, can you read well enough? Yeah, kinda. Can you zoom? Oh, I can't zoom in full screen mode. Come on. No. Well, I'm just going to read it to you, and you're going to believe me. So what you can do is, in the standard approach, the first thing that I would talk to is you have a database service, a class, and it has a method, insert objects that have been updated after this certain date. And what it does, it's going to loop on the arrays, filter, get out the ones that match the condition, and then put them into the database. And that's okay, nothing wrong with that. But how would it look like if you were to split the code that that makes decision from the code that takes action? Well, we could have something like this. We could have a value, because we said that everything is about the values, not the objects and how they interact with each other. So we could have this database action value that has two properties: the array of objects on which the action should be performed, and the kind of action, which could be, a Swift enum, maybe with insert, update, delete cases. And then we could have this method, this function here, that could be just a free function by himself, or a function inside a class of helpers, whatever you like, that simply gets, again, the array of objects and the condition, and filters them to see the one that match the condition, and returns you a package value database action to do stuff with. The advantage of this approach is that it is super easy to test. You just need to, create some input values and make sure that the output that you get is what you're expecting. You don't need to set up a database to test that the things that you are creating are actually the one that you are expecting, and that's pretty good. And it really does just one thing. It's like single responsibility principle plus to the max. It just creates an object that tells you, hey, put all these one into the database. Well, and this is for the code that takes decisions. What about a code that performs an action? Well, that code would be pretty straightforward too. It's just, class database service, perform action, and is expecting a database action value as its input, and then it just does stuff, reads what to do from the value. And once again, the advantages of this approach are that it is very easy to test using simple values. You don't need to have complex data to put into the database. You just come up with simple ones, and you can make sure that they actually went into the database. And you test it once and for all. You can write the test to make sure that object that needs to go into the database go into the database through this method. Objects that are supposed to be removed from the database are removed, and yada yada. And all the rest of your application, no matter how many entities or many objects you need to persist, they're all going to create this database action value and pass it to this method that you have already tested. So you don't need to write tests to make sure that entity A goes into the database and entity B goes into the database, because you tested it already. So these pieces of small functional code that manipulates data and then that create sort of action values, and then other pieces of code, little ones that perform these actions, are the toppings for our pizza. But how do we make the pizza? We bake it, and well, Gary Bernard, once again, test the concept of functional core, imperative shell. We said we have the toppings, and what he suggests is, well, all these values, we can orchestrate how these values are passed through a function, and then the other, and then the other, and then the other, using simple imperative code. And if you were to, draw the architecture of code that looks like this, and that's the pizza. Functional core, the imperative shell that orchestrates how data goes in and out these functional components, and then spits out those kind of like database action and screen update action and side effect action for the code that performs action to run them. And yeah, that's the pizza. And it's pretty good. I think 3 years ago, in 2013 maybe, and he was working with Ruby. It's been a while. We are iOS developer. We have Swift, which is pretty cool. And I think we can do, if not better, we can do something different. So I would like to propose the concept of functional core reactive shell. We already saw that we have both this functional component. And I don't know if you ever heard about the concept of functional reactive programming, if you ever tried it, but if you have a bit of attention, you can guess that functional reactive programming goes very well with functional components. Well, a functional core reactive shell architecture would look something like this. We have our function, once again, that are all together. The inputs are over here. And functional reactive programming is all about signals, signals over time, and signals that are transformed. So our inputs could spit out signals. And we can leverage all the orchestration of our signals, of our value, to functional reactive programming framework. I'll say it again. Functional reactive programming frameworks, like Reactive Cocoa and RX Swift, to take care of all the send this data to this function, and if this function is right, send it to this other one. If it's wrong, send this error. And then when it's time to create a side effect value, just spit it out of the shell like that. And I think that's a pretty nice drawing, but it's probably a bit abstract. So let's see if I can give you an example to sell you on this code that looks like pizza thing. So say that we have an application that needs to fetch stuff from the network and its own cache, a database, for example. Well, we're talking about Swift, we're talking about functional code, it's all about structs, right? So we have this stuff struct that has some properties, and then we have some extensions for our stuff with some the convenience initializers. One of them is failable as well, to get stuff data from a JSON dictionary and from a database object. That code over there is very, very easy to test. It's almost boring. You just need to say, hey, this is the JSON dictionary that I have as an input. Is the output the stuff object that I'm expecting to have? Yes? Happy days, the tester green. Then we could have other pieces of code like cell view model. And again, the test for the cell view model is very simple. You just get a value as its input, you get a value as the output, and you make sure that it is what you were expecting it to be. And these were all the, well, some examples of the functional core, all the toppings for our pizza. What about the effect? Well, a way to do it, a very simple one, is to create a enum effect in your view controller, for example, that you can initialize with the array of cell view models that you want your view controller to show, or with the error that you want your view controller to present. And then you can have a very simple, boring method to update the view with the a method that would get the effect enum value, would switch onto it, and depending on the value of the enum, would do stuff. And that's so far so good. Let's get into the juicy bit, the function, the reactive shell. Well, it looks like this. It's kind of awkward, to be honest, and quite long. But what it does is it gets the two database and network input sources, gets the signals out of them. One is a JSON, the other one is a database value, so it transforms them into the stuff, which is our domain object. It merges together so that like you have only one and it's easier to deal with. Then it transforms again the stuff into a view model initialized with that stuff. And then it transforms the stuff into a side effect value that describes to our side effect receiver what to do. And now that we have a side effect, it just spits it out with this method here so that the view controller that is expecting this side effect can actually execute it. And that's about a simple example of a reactive shell. And I mean, pizza is good. Is this a good idea? Well, to be honest, there are downsides to the approach. The very first one is that there's quite a learning curve to become fluent in this kind of style, right? Because you need to be familiar with all the functional programming ideas and with all the functional reactive programming ideas. And also, I mean, that piece of code that we just saw was long and awkward, and it only gets worse, because that example was very simple. But in my opinion, the advantages that we get from applying this kind of architecture are outweighed the downsides. First of all, the reactive shell is ugly and is long, but it tells all the story of the system, or at least of the piece of computation that you are interested into the system. So you don't need to keep in your mind all the layers and go up and forth the levels of abstraction. You read the reactive shell and you understand what's happening from the input sources to the outputs. Another great advantage is higher code mobility, which means that, like, what does it mean? Well, all these values in our reactive shell are all pure function, and they don't know anything else about the system. They don't depend on anything. They just expect a value as their input, and they spit out something else. So it gets very easy to just replace a function with another one, move one up and one down, add other transformation in the chain. It's very easy to move code around and maintain code. Finally, I mean, learning is good, right? I can't think of any serious architecture that if you learn it, if you play around with it, it doesn't make you richer, even just for the fact that you went through the mental exercise of understanding how it is and to work with it. And that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoy the pizza. My name is Joe. You can find me on Twitter at Mo. I rant about stuff. And I'm testing consultant, testing and infrastructure consultant, and that's why I'm always keen to learn how to write code that is easier to test, because I really think that is an important thing. Thank you. Now, we talked about pizza a lot, so I'm sure you're all very hungry, but do you have any question? I can repeat your question. Oh, but you wouldn't get these awesome people in Sydney. You went down to his level.
Sorry, I couldn't let that one slide. So, FRP is good, I love it, but what about which introduces a unidirectional data flow? How does that sort of interact with FRP, so functional reactive programming, and is it an alternative to what you suggested, or does it complement things?
That's a very good question, and it's pretty cool that you actually had the mic, because it would have been quite long to repeat. Well, Ben next to you and all the guys at JTribe are certainly more informed about reSwift and all the Redux-like pattern for Swift than I am. But what the Redux pattern, the flow pattern, unidirectional data flow is all about is let's split everything that happens in our code, again, from decision and code that takes action, and nothing can change the model except one centralized piece of code, which then sends notifications to other pieces of code that are gonna update themselves, their views based on what they've done. And this fits pretty well in a functional reactive programming setup, because I'm not going to try to find the slide, but basically you can, in our functional core reactive shell, spit out actions, side effect values. Well, what I did in that example of code was just a plain Swift struct, but nothing stops you from spitting out, are they called, however they're called, the values that reSwift expects to transform its own state. So I didn't go through it, but I wanted to. I will eventually try to integrate the two patterns together, and I think they would fit together very nicely. Does this answer your question? Good. There's another question.
Well, I don't need a microphone.
Last time I played with Reactive Cocoa, debugging was very painful. Has that improved since then?
The answer is no. Sorry about it. I think the debugging Cordova code might be easier, but you know, no, it's
JavaScript decoding is JavaScript debugging is actually fairly tooling's good because they need it. So yeah.
I actually want to add about debugging functional programming. Functional programming languages. So essentially, because all functional programming languages is about expressions, so where you have some input and where you have output, which doesn't notate state. So everything is very easy to test. Well, unit test. So essentially, you pretty much don't need to debug because you rely on unit testing in that case.
So I would say theoretically yes, but when I was doing Reactive Cocoa and you would have something that would crash, and you look at your debug list and you have about 200 frames of Reactive Cocoa stuff to dig through, and there's no easy way. I mean, hopefully that's changed, but you can't tell where that bit of signal came from easily if you have a complicated system. So I actually moved away from Reactive Cocoa.
Yeah. Well, I write code that is such good that there's no bugs. So I wouldn't really know how to debug such a code. Now, well, jokes aside, there's a lot of posts, and I think when they moved from 3 to 4, I think I read something about like troubleshooting and debugging tips, but like no, it's just hard because it's just runtime hackery things. So yeah, and I mean, I'm not very good at debugging anyway, so even if it were easy, I would suck at it.
I've just learned something. I didn't know you could debug JavaScript, so that's something I need to continue with. Well,
if anyone has other questions, we can meet with a slice of pizza in our hand and talk about it later. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Gio. So Andy's up next. Are you able to connect to the living?
Number 2, right?
Just zoom into the living room. Yep.
Is
Is that display?
You're mirroring.
Yeah,
at
so how
the
do I
second.
turn off the mirror?
So jump into arrangement, top left there,
Yeah.
and then yeah, uncheck that.
Sweet.
And that's put.
Sweet.
You're already in.
Alright, cool.
That should go away. Yeah, give it a sec. Awesome. Oh yeah, no whatsoever. Oh wait, no, that one. Yeah, this one. Yeah, you don't have to leave there. You can close it up.
Cool.
Right, over to you.
Cool. Hey everyone, my name's Andy. I'm an iOS developer, like most of you here. I'm mainly Swift these days, so pretty much everything I do revolves around Swift. Swift is life. I'm 9 to 5 at a small company called punters.com.au. We're mainly focused around horse racing, sports and gaming. You can hit me up on Slack, the Melbourne Cocoaheads, at Andy Hope. Twitter, Andy Hope. Medium, Andy Hope. Pretty much anything with a username, you can find me on Andy Hope. Just don't find me on Snapchat. So, speaking of Medium, I do a lot of blogging. At the start of the year, I started blogging a lot. So much so, just cool stuff I find in Swift. I've had a few recent publications with This Week in Swift, iOS Dev Weekly. Haven't made Joe's newsletter yet, but that's definitely one of my goals of this year. Blogging so much that even though Chris Latner tweeted me, so I'm kind of a big deal. You should listen to what I have to say. Pretty much I'm blowing up. Thank you. No, so the topic of the talk is called Pretty in Print. The original title was Prettifying Your Log Statements, but I'm actually a fan of 80s movies, 80s teen movies. If you don't remember this, Pretty in Pink? I didn't think so. So anyways, we're going to talk about debugging today. So, what is debugging? Well, we have a few tools supplied by us with Xcode. Excuse me. We have the console log, which is that little window at the bottom right-hand corner of Xcode. We have breakpoints. I think Ashton wrote a blog post last year on breakpoints. He also did a podcast on it. Kudos to him. If you're a little bit more advanced, we have the stack trace. We also have crash logs, which is pretty much a stack trace in your email or the browser. But, you know, everyone in Melbourne knows you're not really good, you're not a real developer unless you use Reveal. But for tonight, we're going to talk about the console log. Well, what is the console log? Pretty much, it is the workhorse of the junior debugger. Print statements everywhere. But, you know, no hating on that because I still do it. So if you're from Objective-C, we had nslog. If you had Swift 1.0, we had printline, which has been deprecated for Swift 2.0, and in terms of print. So let's look at nslog. This is what it looks like in code, and this is what it looks like in your console window. A few more things. We can do like selectors, messages. Again, this is our junior dev, just putting everything in there. So as you can see from this, there's quite a lot of jargon. So let's break it down. So the first bit is a date stamp, followed by the timestamp. Then we have our project name, so this one's called Melbourne Cocoaheads. We have the thread identifier, the process identifier, and the message. So let's look at print. Here's what it looks like in Swift, if you're lucky enough to use Swift. Hashtag Life. So this is it. Pretty simple, right? All right, let's look at the anatomy of the print. Done. That's it. So, nslog. I can see what you mean. It's too verbose. It's way too verbose. Like, no one needs to know the thread identifier or the process identifier 99.99% of times, unless
You know, a lot of people do testing in here, so I'm going to say you guys quite like that. It's also quite limited. Using arguments is gross, like, you know, and a string with format. Ain't nobody got time for that. So, Swift is print. It's simple, it's minimal, it's powerful. Using arguments is really nice. Yay for string concatenation. So, is there a middle ground to print and NSLog? Can we add more verbosity to our print statements? How can we make our print statements stand out? Wouldn't it be cool if we could just combine the two? Yeah, we can. It's called NSPrint. And it looks like this. It's majestic. But no, top of this talk, we're going to make our print statements stand out. So let's make our print statements more verbose. Let's do it within a budget. So how do we do this? It's simple, we just use emojis. So this is what our print statements are going to look like. Yeah. But no, all right, so I mentioned before we have this thing called the budget. So exactly what is the budget? You've got to find out. Not many people into Ozpol here, are there? So, the budget. Okay, so a few people have tried to make log statements in the past, replacements or supplements to print or NSLog, and they usually fail because, you know, these few things. It's too expensive. And what do I mean by too expensive? Characters. It's too long. NSLog is 7 characters minus the shift key. Print, 7 characters again without the shift key. And then you also had to import stuff. Like, who wants to import headers or frameworks into each individual Swift file or .m file just to do some logging? And then you also have external dependencies, which is stuff like Xcode package manager. Then you I can't remember what it's called. Does anyone know? Alcatraz, that's the one, yeah. And then you get this NSLog thing, like, ain't nobody got time. So, here's my solution. We're going to use enums. So, why an enum? So, enums are, in my opinion, safer because there's no initializers. Why would you want to initialize an enum with no value? It's restricted in choice. And why isn't it title cased? Because I wanted to reduce the amount of key presses. I've grown quite fond of print, and then using NSLog grosses me out. So, reduce the amount of keys pressed, which is keeping in mind of the budget. So, let's look at the implementation. So, we have case ln, which of course stands for line. We've omitted the external parameter name, and then we throw in a string. And we do it because Apple do it. It's cheaper. Oh, sorry, Apple did do it. It's cheaper. Our external parameters removed, and the first argument is a string for this example, but you know, later down the track you can use generics or any object or any whatever you want. So what does it look like in code? Simple. log.ln, hello world. But it doesn't actually do anything yet. So how do we make it print? Put in a print statement. Not really, that's dumb. So let's have a look at how do we make it print. Well, we can make a print function on the enum. We can use global variables and use value observers. Or we can create a custom operator. So let's do the print function. So it looks like. Once again, we still say the word print. We just moved it at the end instead of encapsulating it. So we're going to move on to the global variable plus observer. Yeah. It doesn't really look like a print function though, does it? You mean log equals .ln something. It works, but at the same time it's not really safe. We don't really want this to be assigned things. So we'll go into the custom operator. So before we go into that, we're going to talk about the different types of operators. You have the prefix operator, which takes one target to the right of it, such as ++ index. If you've ever seen a C++ developer do a for loop, you'll see this. I don't know why they do that. Is anyone here a C++ developer?
Some of them
I see my friend do it, and I was like, what are you doing? Okay, so we have the infix operator, which takes two arguments, one on the left, one on the right, such as A plus B. I think we've all seen this before. And then finally the postfix operator, which is like the prefix, but it takes an argument to the left side of it, so index plus plus, how C or C style for loops are meant to be made. So, which operator we're going to use? Well, we're going to use the forward slash. I chose the forward slash because it's kind of the only operator left that doesn't require a shift key, looks normal, and is free. I could have used the backward slash, but at the same time, forward slash reminds me of comments, so why not? Yeah, here's what it looks like. So we're going to make a postfix function, and in the body of it, it takes only takes a log, like a log value or log enum type, and then inside of it we do a switch on it, and then in this case we only have one, which is line, and then we print it, which is cool. But you know, it doesn't actually print in emojis, which is the idea of this talk. So how are we going to do this? Well, we're going to make a new print function, or we call it the log function. It's a private function because we don't want anything else using this outside of the log.swift file. It takes two arguments. One is a string, which is emoji, and then one is an object, which is generics. And we print it out, of course, with emoji, string concatenate with a space, and then a string representation of the generics. Yeah. So here's what it looks like, the implementation. So we use the blue diamond because my console is blue and I'm colorblind, so it kind of helps me see these things. And now what it looks like in code is, yeah. So that prints that. So in terms of the budget, it's actually only 2 key presses dearer than print. And you get emojis, so like everyone using emojis these days. Everyone in the slides loves emojis, newsletters. So why wouldn't you want emojis in your console? So this is what it looks like, a few of them. So here we have our string. We can pass in a selector, a URL, a date stamp, an error message, a congratulatory message, and a humor message. So we have a few varieties of them. Oh shit. What's going on? I broke the internet. Pardon? Oh no. Orkies. What is like the green bar mean at the top of Keynote? This is the worst thing right now. Is it a timer? Did I press something? Okay, let's have a look. Here we go. Oh man. Should got the dev one.
I don't know. That's like the old 2 generations ago. Come on. Magic. Magic.
Sweet. Round of applause for Jesse. So yeah, did I go through this? No. All right. So here we have our pass in a selector. We pass in a URL, NS date, NS error, test pass, congratulatory message, joke, humor, ha ha ha. So let's look at these varieties once we put them into it. So we had our original case. So we're going to expand it to URL, NS date, NS error, any object, and any. And in the implementation, this is really, really slow. All right, we've seen it? So yeah, in the implementation, we have like a nice little world icon, clock icon, a big red X. Any object, you use a square, and any I use a circle. But this comes back to performance. So when I first started deving, I used to leave my logs all over the place. And printing is usually cheap. But when used in abundance, it can hinder performance. So what I used to do is I leave like log messages in every scroll view because I'm always tracking the scroll view content offset. You know, plus a whole bunch of other, like Urban Airship. If anyone uses Urban Airship, it's flooded from the get-go. From like, app did launch, about 50 lines of logs. So printing should never make it into production code. So what do? Do we remove all our prints? Or how about we comment all of our prints? Well, we can just use precompiler flags. So what is precompiler flag? We tell the compiler, in this example, we tell the compiler not to include our print code for release builds. So for those who don't know, release builds are for when you archive your app through Xcode for the App Store. Generally, new projects have 2 builds, one for debug, which is when you run in the simulator or you run via USB, and then release builds is when you archive for the App Store. But it's easy to set up. Let's do it. Has everyone got their Macs out? All right. Start with 1. Press the project navigator icon. Press the project's name. Press build settings in the top right. We search for compiler flag. We expand the other C flags. Press the plus button and enter -debug. That's it. So now we're going to tell the compiler to ignore a certain piece of code when it's in release build. Simple. We do the precompiler if statement, if debug, and put our print code inside of it, and then our end if, and that's it. So you're probably thinking, oops, Andy, this is pretty dope, but you should put in like a Cocoa pod or a Carthage file or a car file, whatever. But you know, as I said before, importing stuff is gross. I mean, if it's just a log, you don't really need to import in every individual Swift file. Or sorry, yeah, every individual Swift file, or even your Objective-C header. It's just better to use the source code, which I'll supply on GitHub, and put it into your Swift project and start logging away. Thank you. Any questions?
I'm ready.
Okay. It's not really a question, just a little note that there's an abundance of options for logging, and one of those is, say, use an external application, a Mac application that's NSLogger I'm talking about. It is a dependency, but I do consider using the NSLogger, this library that allows you to just stream your logs to a separate application, quite convenient, because you can log all the things you want, including your JSON responses from the server and everything, and you can filter things by priority, like warning, error, note, debug, whatever. Obviously, you can disable logging certain things in certain conditions or configurations, like release. You can still, for example, log your errors and warnings to different destination, like say Crashlytics or whatever other external logging solutions you can use. You can log to system console as well, like how NSLog does, and obviously the console in Xcode. But it's just, well, it's a bit more powerful, though. If you're logging just maybe just some notes, basically like this happened, that happens, yeah, maybe actually logging to Xcode using print might be actually more useful. But well, your mileage may vary.
Is it so powerful that it can handle emojis?
Definitely, yeah, sure, yeah. Any Unicode, sure, definitely. And I think it actually can, with some effort, handle transferring images into this external logging application, but I didn't do that. I used NSLogger in conjunction with Cocoa Lumberjack. I think it should be should be compatible with Swift. I mean, it's just, you know, a few functions or something.
You could have told me this in private.
What?
Cool.
Oh, well, okay.
I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Thanks for your talk. I think I like the idea about the emoji. And I just want to ask a question. Why don't we actually have a global function? Or just extension for stream or for int or whatever types? A global function might be...
Yeah, I needed a topic for the talk. Like, part of me thought, I was like, okay, I could use a singleton as I was walking up here.
I don't think even need a singleton, just a P function, like Ruby. So P, whatever you can.
Oh, right. You'd always, like, with the emojis, like, I feel that you'd want to specify an emoji type. Like, I mean, it's cool having, like, if you have one called P, print, or whatever,
Yeah.
you know, that would be one type of emoji, but then you need to pass in an argument or maybe even a case to print out a different type of emoji. At least that's the way I thought of it. But, yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Shoot.
Jesse gave me the responsibility. You were talking. I was just wondering, how do you accept multiple, based on the function arguments, how do you accept variag arguments? It seems to be just one string or one NSURL or one NSDirt.
You could, I forget the code, but you can, I forget what it's called when you have like a comma separated. Yeah, variadic list. So it wouldn't be an array, but you just pass in like a comma separator of generics.
Oh, okay.
I'd imagine so anyways, yeah. There you go, yeah. Cool, so any more questions?
Any other questions?
Like I said, I mean, I blog quite regularly. Up on Medium probably later tonight, tomorrow. I did part 1 last week. I'll do part 2 later tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Perfect timing. The pizza guy just quizzed me for 10 minutes on what is this group? Who's making money out of this? Who's profiting? Like, is everyone here like someone important? And I said yes. Anyway, the pizzas are here. Continue. We'll be back with everyone else in about half an hour.
Hi, my name is Ai.
Hi, I'm Jesse.
And I would like to say something to the group. It's not a job ad or anything. I put together a Cocoaheads group in Poland.
Oh, awesome.
Almost 3.5 years ago.
Oh, awesome.
So I would love to ask them, like, would you pose for a picture to say hi to the guys in Poland?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
When everyone comes back from pizza, do you want to do that?
Yeah, that would be perfect.
Yeah, awesome. So you're from Poland?
Originally, yeah, but I live everywhere but there. Yeah.
How long have you been in Melbourne?
Like 3 weeks.
Oh, awesome. Oh, since the last Cocoaheads meetup. That's great.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that's...
Right.
What are you doing in Melbourne? Like, what's the...
Visiting family.
Oh, cool.
And, yeah, just, I hadn't been here before, ever. So I just wanted to check out the place.
Oh, awesome, awesome.
Yeah. I normally live in Taiwan these days.
What's it like living in Taiwan? My brother's really keen to go and live there. And I've lived in South Korea and in China and in Hong Kong. Yeah. So Taiwan I'm keen on.
Well, I think Taiwan is like better China with much less air pollution. Better culture.
Yep.
It's somewhat westernized
Yep.
and Japanized.
Yeah, okay. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. And they separate themselves from China, so like they don't want to.
They're trying to, yeah, like as much as.
And they are very good.
That's really cool. How long have you been there? through there? Like, what's the? Are you obviously working while you're there, or?
Right now I'm not working.
Yep.
I stopped, I would say around 1.5 years ago. I have a 6-year-old child,
Yep.
and I'm trying to get him to speak multiple languages.
That's so cool.
And it does take quite a bit of energy and planning and researching like every new place. So right now I'm on that, but I'll be looking to get back to doing more of that. Maybe half a year from now. So
That's really cool. No, my partner's, she's into education, so she's been teaching English around the world, and she's done in South Korea, Japan. She hasn't done China. I ended up in China on my own, but
how did that happen?
I had a friend living there, and I had nothing else to do, and I'm like, oh, why don't I come and stay with you in China? And while I went to China, was there for like 4 or 5 months. I don't know. I forget what my visa was. Either way, I was touching the borders of what was appropriate to be in China on my own. And at that stage, my girlfriend, now fiance, she was in China. She was in Korea. So I travelled between the two places and sort of stayed in China and went to Korea and was back and forth. I loved it. And as a kid, my dad was an expat in Hong Kong. So I kind of grew up for 5 years in Hong Kong. So I've always got this affinity to Asia. And I'm always regretting not picking up the languages, which is obviously a focus of yours. I miss. And I wish. I mean, I end up in China, I can pick up bits and pieces of the Mandarin, kind of vernacular, but nothing really. I was ignorant as a kid, just stayed in my own little bubble.
Yeah, I'm trying to push my child to speak
That's so
those
cool.
languages.
It's. I think as kids you pick it up so much quicker.
Some kids can be very stubborn and resistant.
Oh,
and
no,
they
of course.
don't want to do that. They want.
Of
It
course.
doesn't really happen for those.
I was that kid. I think I was when I moved to Hong Kong. I was 8, so I was that kid. I just wasn't interested. But that's really cool. That's really cool. So you're here visiting family, and then back to Taiwan for a while.
Checking out the place, yeah, and breathing in some Western culture. Because I'm so tired. Honestly, I'm so tired. Just the way Asian people are, it's so different. So, like, I loved it in the beginning, but trying to integrate their ways of being into like my ways.
Yeah.
I just, I lost my like self-confidence and stuff because everything I've been building it upon was not present there. And
No.
Like no events, nobody to connect with, and all the women and basically men too were like about home and cooking. I have a child, but I'm not really into like being a housewife, which is like there. This is in high regard.
That's how it works.
And that's what everybody does there. And to find, I'm staying in Taichung, so that's not even Taipei. That's not the capital city of Taiwan. I think it's the 3rd largest city. Try to find any IT communities. Just there is nothing, and there isn't even anything I could put together. Chinese is not good enough, and not many people speak English. But yeah, everybody's gone to Taipei, where the weather sucks.
Right.
There.
Okay.
Yeah. So I thought, I'll be good. I'll be all right. I'll just, take a vacation, learn languages with my child. I need a break. And I did need it, but it's been 1.5 years like that. Before I lived in various places too, and including Mexico and Belgium and
you've been
Denmark.
everywhere. That's so cool.
Yeah. But
That's
call
really
on
cool.
me.
So how much longer have you got, like in your head?
I'm gonna try to spend 3 months for sure.
Yep.
Probably 6 months or more
Yep.
in Taiwan. Give my child to speak more Chinese.
Yep. Is it working well?
It's working pretty well.
Yeah,
He's
good.
become very resistant. But you know, he's 6. He doesn't have much of a choice yet.
No. You can still demand it. Yeah.
Especially the Chinese one.
Yep.
Chinese parenting.
Yeah.
Doing it. Yeah, so that's what I'm gonna try to do, and after that, I don't know. I might try to move here, or
That'd be
go
awesome.
to Thailand again, and
can hold it or...
Yeah, I'll just put it in here just because I'm going to be standing.
Yeah.
It's just being live streamed.
Yeah.
Ooh, added pressure.
Yeah.
Frankiac.
Cool. It's totally chill. All right, we've got a special last-minute guest. Introduce herself. Here we go.
But I would like a full room. Hey guys, come back! Yeah, we're starting. Right. There's no more pizza. I should know. I got the last 2 pieces. All right. So I started Cocoaheads in Poland. Only that one group, not the Cocoaheads movement. So I started a group almost 3.5 years ago. And would you guys like to say hi to the guys in Poland? I'll take a picture. Oh, actually, my self-intro, right? My self-intro. So I started it, and then I left it and went to Asia and started learning Chinese, and got a Samsung phone. So you probably all hate me. Go figure. Yeah. So I have Steve's glasses and a Samsung, which I'm going to use to take a picture of you. Say hi, please, be nice. Hold on, panorama. Yeah, that's Samsung. not work as intended. I'm going to have to get an iPhone again. Yeah. All right. I think it worked. Let's see. Where's the speaker? Who's talking next? I'll take a look. Yeah, that's weird Samsung stuff, right?
It's a cool video. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, looks legit. All right.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
All right. All right, next up's Cam.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, so I'm Cam. I'm a lawyer that works in the tech space. I've got my own firm and everything. I'm kind of like the Uber of law firms. No, not really. So, yeah, today's presentation is about privacy for app developers. I've spoken here once before, late last year, about IP, but this is kind of an area which I find that a lot of my clients have got very little idea about. So I thought I'd jump in today with a few pointers for you guys as developers and what you kind of need to know. So here's a couple of ways you can get in contact with me. Twitter @CamRogersLegal, email address is there, and my mobile phone is there as well. So feel free to get in contact, not just about privacy, but IP or any other issues that you're kind of facing. Cool. So the format for today's presentation is pretty much, I want to do an overview about what privacy actually is, then talk about the Australian position, and then also talk about outside Australia, because obviously as app developers you're not bound by territory and you're releasing all over the world. But then finally what I really want to talk about is what you actually need to know. So that's going to be the meat of the presentation. It's going to be some practical tips about privacy and what it is you actually need to know. And finally, if we've got time, we'll jump into some questions. But I'll be hanging around a little bit afterwards too, so feel free to contact me. First things first, I've got a disclaimer here. Just the information I'm providing is general. It's the nature of privacy is that context is very important. So don't rely on anything I'm saying today exclusively and apply it to your circumstances. I think you should probably speak to somebody about what it is that you guys are doing. All right then. So first of all, the overview. There's a fair bit of information on these slides. The main reason for that is because I haven't had all that much time to prepare and I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. But also in case anybody wants to get a copy of these, I'm happy to email it to you at a later date. So what is privacy then? Well, it's the right of natural persons to control the flow of their own personal information into the public domain. So that then begs the question, what constitutes personal information? Well, that means information or an opinion about an identified individual or an individual who is reasonably identifiable, whether the information or opinion is true or not, and whether it's recorded in a material form or not, so whether or not it's actually written down. Now you'll notice that in that definition there's no kind of concept of the word private. And the reason for that is that privacy as a concept, the word private, is a contextual test. What constitutes private is not governed by any one law at a state or federal level, and that's because it depends on the circumstances and facts of any particular matter. So information for one person that could be considered private may not be considered private for another person, and for that reason there is no statutory definition of what actually means private. It's a contextual test. You need to look at the circumstances surrounding what it is that has been made available. And accordingly, the Privacy Act, which is the principal act that governs privacy in Australia, doesn't talk about the word what constitutes private and what doesn't. Instead, it talks about what could be considered private information the way that that is handled. So it's a very sort of practical piece of legislation that talks about how private information is handled. It regulates the way individuals' personal information may be collected, how it may be used and stored by those who collect it. In particular, it includes 13 Australian privacy principles which set out the standards, rights and obligations for the handling, holding, using, accessing and correction of personal information, including sensitive information. So rather than talking about private information, it talks about personal information, which depending on the circumstances may or may not be considered private. So just as a brief overview, what do these things cover? The important thing here to remember is that the 13 privacy principles are applicable across all of the community. So these haven't been tailor-made for app developers or any one kind of member of the community. So they're equally applicable to umbrella manufacturers as they are to anybody else. And the important thing to remember is that it's your responsibility to work out how these things actually apply to what it is that you're doing. So just to quickly run through them, they govern a lot of things, but we'll have a quick look. They govern the open and transparent management of personal information, so having a privacy policy. They include individual rights, so a person having the option of transacting anonymously or using a pseudonym where practicable. They cover the collection of solicited personal information and receipt of unsolicited personal information. They cover how personal information can be used and disclosed, maintenance of the quality of that information, and keeping that information secure. And as I say, it's your responsibility to figure out how these things actually apply to you. So that begs the question, how does it actually apply to app developers? Well, the first thing that you need to do as developers is work out whether or not you're collecting, storing, sharing any personally identifiable data. Now, there's things that you guys do as app developers that you don't automatically realise could be considered personally identifiable information. So things like IP addresses, unique device identifiers, sort of slightly more obvious ones perhaps, but then you get to things like contact lists and things that reveal details about the contacts themselves and also social connections, and then voice, print, facial recognition, biometrics. Don't know if anybody gets into that sort of stuff. And finally, things like location information, because it can reveal user activity patterns and habits. So again, remember that context is key. The information that you gather may not on the face of it appear to be personally identifiable. The way that you present it and the way that you use it could mean that you're in breach of the Privacy Act. Any non-personally identifiable info is not protected, so you don't need to worry about it. But again, remember that context is key. So we've talked about the Privacy Act, we've talked about the nature of personally identifiable information. It may or may not be considered private. And the best way to think about the Privacy Act is that it's a regulatory mechanism that essentially encourages a best practice with respect to the information that you're gathering. So that's really what it's there for. But there's another category of information which is to be treated even more highly regarded and more sort of sensitive, and that is sensitive information. Now this sort of stuff, health, racial or ethnic origin, sexual orientation, criminal record, all this sort of stuff. I'm not sure how many of you guys as developers are actually in the business of collecting that type of thing, but the upshot is ultimately this. If you're collecting personal information on your users, then you need to be careful. But if you're collecting sensitive information of your users, then you need to be super careful, and you should probably speak to somebody about what it is that you're doing and the way that you're handling it. So that's the Australian position. Now, of course, as I said at the beginning, you guys aren't living in a vacuum. Hopefully when you make an app, you release it, it goes worldwide. The thing you need to remember is that if you are selling your app into other jurisdictions, you need to be aware of the privacy laws in that jurisdiction. And that is actually as onerous as it sounds. If you're releasing into Vietnam, you need to know Vietnamese rules in relation to privacy. USA, USA laws. Australia, Australian laws. So it is quite a high test, and people often get sort of a bit freaked out by that. But the good thing about it is that generally speaking, most nations that I've had dealings with have got fairly similar rules with respect to this stuff. And certainly if you're selling via the App Store, for example, they set a very high standard, and you would automatically, by satisfying Apple's conditions, the stuff that you're releasing would adhere to American law. So that being said, you need to be careful if you are specifically targeting a particular territory, that you are aware of the rules in relation to privacy that jurisdiction may have. An example of what Apple's guidelines actually say with respect to privacy, here's a quote from the SDK. It says that apps cannot transmit data about a user without obtaining the user's prior permission and providing the user with access to information about how and where the data will be used. So essentially that's saying you need to have a privacy policy. And in fact, when you submit apps to the App Store and you do nominate the box saying that you are going to be collecting personal information, there's another box there that will say, do you have a privacy policy? If you don't, and you tick that, then you could wind up in a fair bit of strife, both through the proprietary interests of Apple and also the jurisdiction in which the app is released. So always remember, if you are collecting personal information, you need to have a privacy policy. What do you need to know then? Number one thing, as I just said, is actually have a privacy policy in place. Putting it in place is just a protection mechanism for your business. So make it compliant with Australian law. But in order, these are the things that they actually need to cover. First of all, it should cover who you are and how to contact you. It should cover what kinds of personal information your app collects and what it stores, how you collect it, where it will be stored. So is it on the device or is it a server somewhere? What it is that you do. The purposes for which your app collects that personal information, that's a very important point. And then finally, how that information will be used and disclosed. You also need to be able to say how an individual can access that information in the event they want to have it changed or altered or even deleted. And there should be a contact in the privacy policy too, so that if somebody wants to complain about something or follow something up, it's very straightforward as to how they do it. Finally, the link to the privacy notice must be very clear and prominent. So you need to work out a way. I would advise you have a link somewhere inside the app that goes back to your website, and you do it that way. But certainly it needs to be visible and reasonably easily seen. What else do you need to know? Well, if you need to make somebody responsible for personal info security within your organisation. This presentation, it's a little bit tricky for me because I don't know exactly what all of you guys do. I imagine there's a fair few of you guys do work for hire stuff, in which case this is useful to you, but not strictly speaking required, because if you're preparing the app for somebody else and it's kind of their responsibility to do. But if you own the company and it's your app and you're releasing it, then all of this stuff is incredibly important. But even so, it should be one person's responsibility for considering security every stage of an app's development. So if it's a solo operation, then that person is you. You're the final line of defence. You need to know what is sensitive information and what isn't. As I said earlier, there's a higher standard when it comes to sensitive personal information. And there's an even higher standard again when it comes to kids' information. But because I've only got sort of 15, 20 minutes today, I didn't get into any of that stuff in relation to kids' data, but that's another kettle of fish entirely. You should take stock of the data that you collect and you retain. So practice data minimisation. Just simply don't collect any data that you don't need, because if it's sitting there, it's a liability, particularly if it relates to an individual's who they are or what it is that they do, or their sensitive information. Another area that's pretty important is in relation to utilising third-party code or software development kits. As the app developer, and if you are the ultimate app controller, if you introduce other code into the ecosystem of the app, which is collecting data, which is personal information or sensitive information, then you as the app controller can wind up in a lot of hot water. There's been a few cases in the game space recently which have really brought this into light. There's the Retro Dreamer case, which was basically a game developer allowed in an ad network, and the ad network started collecting information unbeknownst to the game developer, and the game developer wound up getting sued, and it wound up costing them almost $500,000 to settle the matter. So you need to be aware of what kind of code you're introducing into your app and what these companies are actually doing. So do your research. Ask, does this library or SDK have known security vulnerabilities? Has it been tested in real-world settings? What is the stuff that these guys are actually collecting? And additionally, some services will actually require you to have a privacy policy in place, so AdSense, for example. So there are some trusted partners out there. Google is one of them. But there's loads of others. But make sure that you do your homework. You need to have controls in place, such as contracts that ensure that these third parties process personal information in accordance with their obligations under privacy law. So that's just an additional point to what I was saying before. And then as you release the app, you've got to remember this is an ongoing process. Your relationship with your users is sort of very important. So you're not done once you go live. You need to stay aware and communicate with your users. So even after you ship your app, stay involved. So this means that if somebody gets in contact with you via email and needs some information, you need to be able to respond to that in a prompt and efficient manner. So generally what this I advise is that you have a privacy email address so that people can get in contact with you about this type of stuff. And therefore check your inbox. User feedback can help you spot and fix security vulnerabilities. Yeah, so that's kind of a bit of a potted, neat history about privacy as it stands within Australia and overseas. I think the important thing to remember is that it's essentially what the privacy legislation is about providing a framework by which anybody who collects personally identifiable information can manage it, retain it, and use it in a way that will not mean that they get themselves into hot water in the event that it becomes apparent that some of it can be considered private. Does anybody have any questions about what I was talking about today? Yeah?
So I'm aware of certain legislations in countries such as Russia, for example, where they actually enforce companies that collect personal or even sensitive information about their users to store that information on servers physically located in Russian Federation, which is obviously not really convenient for web developers because they would probably want to store that all in some sort of cloud, which is probably somewhere in the US, which means that theoretically that application somehow would be blocked by the governing organization somehow. Maybe they would ask Apple to do that or something like that if they somehow know of that they're actually collecting information outside of Russia. Do you know any other countries that practice something similar? Just because obviously there are many apps out there and some of them collect information and most of them are worldwide and you never know.
Yeah, look, I think that, as I was saying, like most territories are fairly consistent with respect to this stuff. The EU, for example, is yeah, do have safe harbour provisions, but they sort of operate as a block. So that if once you adhere to the standards in one, it's applicable throughout the EU. So yeah, sorry, no specific answer to your question. Up the back.
I was just wondering, is it implied in the Privacy Act that if you were to store sensitive data, that the only requirement for the actual developer is that they take the industry standard level of protection for their data? They don't need to do any more than whatever the industry standard. So if there is a breach, if they can prove that they satisfy the industry standard and they did the best they could, is that enough to not get in trouble?
Are you just talking about kind of storage of the data?
Yeah, and storage and maybe even in other ways, such as maybe providing APIs that could get hacked and stuff like that.
Yeah. That is generally speaking true, although, you know, what constitutes industry standard is kind of that's a fairly rubbery test and is prone to change. So you should probably, I mean, the main thing about all this is just the ongoing dialogue with your users so that they know where they stand, so that the information that you have, you know, they're aware of what it is that you're collecting and the reasons you're collecting it. You essentially put them on notice, and that's the best policy that you guys as developers can actually take. What gets you into hot water is when you're not talking and you're not disclosing what it is that you're doing with the information, but you're collecting it anyway.
Yeah, but here's a follow-up question. Can you contract out of it?
No. You can't contract out of it, no. It's the buck stops with you. If you're the controller of the app, then that's where people are going to come looking. Yep.
I've been to a couple of medical tech meetups, and apparently Australia is one of the countries that certain information has to be stored on servers in Australia. It was a big deal when AWS or somebody got servers on the ground in Australia because people then could use AWS. I'm not sure it was AWS, but whatever cloud provider it was, they could use them to store their data in the cloud rather than not being able to store their data because it was on in the US or wherever it was. I'm sure Australia is not unique in having requirements like that. So if that's your medical type data. So if you're storing anything that's extremely sensitive like that, there are probably rules of financial data too. You need to probably check lots of places for that. Relying on Apple to say it's okay for the US won't cut it for other places. Specifically because the server, Apple doesn't know where your server is located when you submit an app.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. Particularly when you're talking about sensitive information, as I was mentioning earlier. Yeah. Over here?
If you're providing a service that enables other people to store sensitive data, how worried do you need to be about that?
It's a good question. So can you give me a few more details about what you're doing, or is it covered by an NDA?
Service and someone could be putting anything in there about information about their customers, clients, whatever.
Yeah, look, I'd be wary about enabling it. I mean, in that instance, if what it is, it sounds like you're more of a kind of a service provider. Perhaps you can sort of contractually obligate the end owner of the IP to be the entity that's in control of that. But yeah, I think you should probably be a little bit careful. Yeah, it's a grey area. Yeah.
You said that you should provide a privacy policy.
Yep.
Within your app. Is that something that the users have to explicitly agree to, or is that something that can just be available in the app that they can implicitly say that if you're using the app, then you've agreed to this policy?
Yeah, there's no sort of like click-through requirement or anything like that, but there is kind of a visibility requirement. So, you know, generally speaking, there should be a fairly robust way that it's there. So, almost in the description of the app, for example, you can potentially link out to your website and have it housed there. That's a way that I've seen it done before, and that tends to work. Yep.
Just to follow on this guy's point, there was one question. I've used social media for a really good example of people volunteering what I would call sensitive information. Where does that leave you if you were doing something in the social space with apps? Because obviously you've got 30-year-old kids now, legally able to use them, like Instagram.
Yeah.
And often there are announcements around the sexual orientation or something done over that platform. And so what is the requirement on the app owner for that?
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess, you know, something like that depends on the sort of the context of how it's being gathered. I mean, if you're talking about data that if somebody volunteers on a space like Twitter, then I don't think Twitter can necessarily be held responsible for sort of getting out into the public domain. But if it was a backroom questionnaire where you're collecting data that way, or something even more insidious like some sort of analytic that was capturing this data in some way, and that was then being on-sold and they were doing something with it to target ads or something like that, then I think you'd be in a fair bit more trouble. But certainly those public, outwardly facing platforms where people just use it to release information about themselves, I think that you'd probably be fine in that circumstance. Yeah. There's no global standard. As I was saying, it's different dependent on your jurisdiction. So you should probably, there's some online places where you can find ones that are applicable for various jurisdictions that are somewhat effective. But if you are looking at targeting a specific place and you are looking at gathering things like sensitive information, then you probably should have one tailor-made. That's a pretty important cornerstone of what you're doing, I think, that you can't really kind of ignore. I think you can rely on just one that you find from somewhere else. Yep.
As an Australian consumer, do we have rights to request that companies delete all personal data that they have on us?
Yes, you can, unless, you can essentially, opt out and ask what information they've got on you and demand that it gets deleted. Yeah, sure.
So let's say like Facebook, if you wanted to like cleanse, not just take it offline, but actually get rid of it from everywhere. Facebook's a US company or an Irish company or whatever they are.
Yeah, both.
How do you make sure that happens?
I'm not exactly sure how you make sure that happens. I know it's about a 15-step process to kind of get anything removed.
Are you sure? Are you sure you want to delete it? Are you sure? We'll give you a week. We'll give you a week.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
My question is specific about Facebook logins.
Okay.
So I created a social app and I launched it in San Francisco. So my app requires people to log in with Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
So like people log in through Facebook in Melbourne as well. But I'm just wondering, is there a specific law or website that has research about privacy regarding to Facebook logins in the States?
Yeah, look, I haven't actually read in a lot of detail what you actually agree to when you sign up to Facebook. I mean, I did it so long ago I wouldn't even remember what it said. But it's obviously a fairly loose arrangement whereby they're allowed to partner with these organisations and you just kind of have to go along with that.
They use their email address and their public profile, which is like their profile pictures.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, how did you get yourself into that situation? Did you approach somebody at Facebook and say that you wanted to be a part of this, or?
So we use their API. So
Oh, right, yeah.
Put the profile picture and emails from their database.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that in the API license agreement or whatever it was that you had to sign or click through to get to that point, there's probably some conditions in there about what you can and can't do with the information that you've got. So maybe double check that.
Thank you so much, Cam.
No worries. Thank you.
Ryan. Where's Ryan? Have we met before? Oh, awesome, Ryan. Hey. We're going to hear about some crazy Carthage stuff. I'm going to get off the living room here. Say again. So jump on the Wi-Fi. We got scroll down. We've got shit. What I'm looking for is, I'll get you to turn this off as well, flux off as well.
Sure.
Once you're Team Square visitors, co-working. Oh shit. COWORK. Co-working. And then, yeah, turn flux off.
Cool. And then,
Whoa, it is way nicer when it's on.
yeah.
You should get a AirPlay.
I've got it at home, so it's not.
Otherwise, you can jump to display preferences. Display displays. I'm just gonna like nuke. Now's a good time to grab another wine as we technical our way to this. And we're gonna go, all right. I'm off it, I'm way off it.
Oh, there it is.
Here we go. Oh, we've got 5082.
Awesome.
Are you right with that? Have you?
Yeah, mate. Yeah, it's good. All right. That's awesome. Thanks.
You can bolt that or do what you like.
Yep.
Have you just got?
Oh, and a little bit of Xcode demo, but yeah.
Is that resolution okay for you?
Yeah, mate. It's fine.
Yeah. Cool. All right.
Yeah, it's perfect.
All right, yeah. Say hi and who you are.
Yeah, cool.
G'day everyone, my name's Ryan. I know it's pretty late, but this will be pretty quick, pretty short. So funny story, a friend of mine this morning was saying, oh, you're talking at the Cocoaheads group tonight. Are you talking about Carthage, and are you going to talk about why it's like the best tool for building frameworks, or are you just going to talk about other stuff? And I said, oh, I don't want to be antagonistic, I'm just going to talk about my tips for using it. Why it's the best is probably done another time. So yeah, this talk is about using Carthage, and I think using Carthage well. And really, the subtext there says it all. So really, the less Xcode knows about the fact you're using Carthage, the better. If you take nothing away from this talk, if you bear that concept in mind, you can't really go too far wrong. All right, a little bit about me. I was lucky enough to work in Silicon Valley for a few years. I did some iOS, some Python, some web stuff, and now I'm back in Melbourne doing freelance developing, a bit of agile coaching and technical training. So what about you? Who here uses Carthage? Wow, okay, that's impressive. Who here uses CocoaPods? Who uses the Swift Package Manager? Wow, that's impressive. Okay, I need to talk to you guys later. That's awesome. Okay, so by the end of this session, I would hope that you might question if you're using Carthage in the best possible way. And in any case, you might look for opportunities to further decouple it from your Xcode project. That's really what all my tips are about. Okay, so straight from the Carthage GitHub page, it says this, that it's intended to be the simplest way to add frameworks to your Cocoa application. That's all it's meant to do. And that's all you should use it for. It's pretty simple. Just to go back to this slide, there's a well-known website that has lots of good tutorials for iOS, and I think it's really, really great. One of the tips they give is that where Carthage builds your stuff, you just kind of drag it from there into your project. And that's where I think things go wrong. If we look at this statement, it said that it's intended to be the simplest way to add frameworks to your project, but it doesn't say, by the way, drag them from where they are built straight into your project. Okay, so tip one, who here uses Make? Right, okay, I use it, and I use it because I'm forgetful, and I find it hard to remember the right commands for things. Plus, if I'm working on a project with lots of other people, it's cool that we all kind of use the same commands. So with this Make file up here, there's two Carthage commands in here. One is that we only want to pull down the platform and build for iOS. Obviously, if you're building for other platforms, that's useful, but it's going to make Carthage go a lot faster. That could be a killer tip just right there. Also, if you just want to clean everything out, it's nice to have a little make command to do that. Really simple. Tip 2, ignore cartridge files. From this well-known tutorial website, it'll also tell you that you should commit your cart file.resolved so you know which dependencies have been resolved. I think this is a super bad idea. You want to, in my opinion, ignore the cartridge directory and everything in it. You want to ignore cart file.resolved because all you are using cartridge for is to build your dependencies. What happens then is going to come in tip 3. Okay, so you've pulled down your cartridge dependencies. You've built the framework. What do you do then? You take, you move, and then you add to your project, okay? So what I recommend is that you create a directory called frameworks that's in the source root for your project. Then you copy it to there, and then you drag it into Xcode. All right, so I'll show you exactly what I mean by this. This is a sample little project I built earlier. And if we look here, this is the root level of the source, and I've got this frameworks directory. Okay, so from something I did earlier, this is the Carthage directory, right? In Carthage, build, iOS, and here we've got Alamo Fire. So what I did earlier is I copied from here, I went into my frameworks directory, and I pasted that in. Okay, now I can take this, I can take this, I can delete it. Okay? Because that's all that Carthage is. It builds frameworks. But the least that your Xcode project knows about Carthage, the better. There's no benefit to Xcode that it needs to know. Oh. Okay. Tip 4, no internet, no problem. Rage quit coder. Does that phrase mean anything to anyone? Right. When you're building your project, you shouldn't rely on internet access. You shouldn't rely on GitHub. You shouldn't rely on anything. You should be able to build your project without talking to anything outside of your network. So, not needing Carthage to actually pull down dependencies while you're building is just good practice. A, because it's one less thing that can break you, but it's just less stuff that your build has to do in order to build. And really, that's all that I have to share with you guys about how to use Carthage correctly. So the most important thing is that you use Carthage to build your frameworks, but then you introduce a manual step. And I actually think it's really good that this step is manual. You take it from where Carthage puts it, you copy it somewhere else, and then you add it to Xcode from that location. Some people would say that, well, isn't it good that I can update my cart file and then I just build and then all of my dependencies are refreshed? I like surprises, but not when they can potentially break my application. So I'm very intentional about what I update and when I update it. So they are my, I guess, very opinionated tips about Carthage. And if you want to talk to me about Carthage, then I'd love to chat to you after the talk. Thank you very much. Question, yeah.
So, I can't help but ask the question. Hold on.
Thanks for that, Jesse. I need to ask the question, does this fix a problem that personally I've been experiencing and makes me hate Carthage with every fibre of my being, 20+ minute build times on CI and CD? Because I'm assuming you'll be checking in your built frameworks and not relying on the internet to build something and waiting for something to go wrong and spending half the day trying to figure out why.
Yes.
Then I'm going to use Carthage, thank you.
Because the thing is that Carthage is not a dependency manager. I hear people call it that and I cringe. It's a framework builder. and it wears that name with pride. Yep. Oh, sorry.
These questions are good.
Do you see the same issues with cocoa pods?
I don't have anything bad to say about CocoaPods. I don't use it. Ever since Carthage has been released, I really like its philosophy on keeping things simple. The one thing I'll say about CocoaPods is that I don't like that it changes so fundamentally the structure of my project. That's why I try to avoid using it if I can.
Well, the problem one of the problems I see with CocoaPods is that if someone updates their system, they've got a different version of CocoaPods than the person down the hall has. It's a different version that someone else has, and if the build system is constantly updating, they've got a moving target. You have no version control over what you're building. CocoaPods has a minimal version. I don't know if it has a maximum version in the pod file. Maybe it does, and it's a non-issue. I've just mainly inherited systems where it's like, here's how you use the CocoaPods to get the pods in.
Yeah, I mean, CocoaPods, I think, has an incredible community behind it, and the people that work on the CocoaPods project have done a lot to share really useful info about how to build projects. I guess the thing about CocoaPods, it's not that CocoaPods is bad, it's just that every time I hit build, CocoaPods is doing a ton of stuff which I only ever want to happen once. And so when you use Carthage, it produces a framework, you copy and paste it and you drag it into your project, it's done. The only thing where Carthage is actually, you know, that this project even knows that Carthage exists, and I really don't like this, is this step. And it needs to strip out binaries that are built for the simulator. If it wasn't for this requirement, there would be literally nothing in this project where you'd be able to tell that Carthage is used. That's kind of where I hope to get to one day. Yeah.
God. So I can agree. I do agree with checking in dependencies. Thank you. I do agree with checking in source code of dependencies. That's, for example, what I do with CocoaPods. And I do agree that there are situations where checking in binary dependencies is important, especially when building with Swift. But why not just keep the frameworks in the build directory and link to them from your project and just keep them there and only update Carthage when you want to and when you know that what you are doing actually. And because you are checking in dependencies and there are binaries, you can actually revert that change if something goes wrong. Why copy them manually?
Yeah, I guess like the kind of explanation you gave where like if you do this and you do this and you do this and you do this, that's why I don't do it. Because there's a lot of things that you have to do to make sure you don't get things wrong. I'll give you an example. Often what happens is that someone will add something from the build, and Xcode, we know that Xcode tries to be really helpful, like, you know, the fix this issue thing that no one ever wants to click because they swear it's going to blow their project up. So Xcode, I love that it's trying to be so helpful, but sometimes it screws everything up. One thing that it does, if you add a framework from the build directory, sometimes, depending on what that framework has, it might actually also add the checkout directory to your path as well. So you'll be inspecting code and you'll actually have no idea that you've added more than just the build directory to your framework search paths or library search paths. So that's why I don't let Xcode anywhere near those Carthage build directories. I don't trust it, and there's been a lot of issues where I've been working with a project in Carthage, things have broken, and 99 times out of 100, it's because some weird path manipulation has come in and no one's checked changes to the Xcode project. So for me, it's all about risk mitigation, right? I don't want to spend time talking to people going, it builds for me, it doesn't build for you, what version of Carthage have you got, blah, blah, blah. It's like, all right, if we do this copy and paste step, Nothing can go wrong unless someone builds the wrong version, copies and pastes it in the wrong spot. So for me, it's that surety. That's what it's all about. With CI in particular, you don't want any surprises. Yep.
Talking about the CI actions, given your approach, so it will be lots of binaries in the your repository. So to checking out the repository will take a while, and especially given the fact that you have many different projects or many different single responsibilities libraries. So, and you might have, I don't know, 20 of them or so. So to check them out during the CI build, the clean checkup builds, so it will take a while. So how do you deal with that?
Well, this is the thing, I don't check them out with the CI. They're checked into my source code. I use Carthage to build the framework. I drag that into my project. That gets committed into my source code repository. So when it builds on a CI machine, it doesn't need any network access. Doesn't need to build anything. It's already there. Yeah.
But your project needs Git access, right? So when your CI machine pulls the latest version of the project, it's going to have to pull the entire framework.
Yeah, exactly. And
yeah.
A large change to pull it.
Yeah, and it might take a while, and especially if it's
I mean, of course you need internet to do something, but the point is that once you've got the source code and you want to run build, that then you're not like saying, you know, go out to the internet, fetch all of my stuff, bring it down, compile a framework. It's like, why would I do that again and again and again? Just do it once. And then it's done.
Building the frame will actually take longer than plugging it.
Yeah. Yep.
That's awesome. I recently had a problem where GitHub went down. My environment decided to scale, and it tried to download all the dependencies from GitHub, and then that failed. So therefore, the environment was bad. Therefore, the whole environment was bad. Therefore, my whole website went down. Therefore, I learned not to use GitHub as a CDN. And, yeah, here we are with CocoaPod's problem. And basically, yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. No worries. Thank you.
Final presentation is Ashton tonight. You've got a CocoaPod sticker. Is that? It's okay. It's okay. But I use it properly. You need some Wi-Fi.
Oh, yeah. Hang on. Good. Go. Did it even connect? Oh, there we go.
Airplay. Shit.
Okay.
There's so much Wi-Fi going on here. It's maybe select it again. Just tell it again. Oh, 90/40. That's your deal.
This is like the Melbourne Cocoaheads dance.
Can we not just use HDMI?
HDMI, it works. But this is way more interesting. This is HDMI over Wi-Fi.
Next, we should try and airdrop some files.
That's not going to work. I've tried that.
Okay.
I'd maybe just try it again. Just give it the nose. You enter the code the first time, and then you tap it again, it works. See? You're the best. That's it.
Look at that. Huh? Cool.
And not even a single drop in the YouTube feed. Because the Wi-Fi.
Oh, that is a camera. Hello. Hello, everyone. You might remember me from talks such as scheming defaults and breakpoints. If you haven't heard those, go watch them or read my blog posts or whatever. They're good. Sorry, go back. But today, I'm talking about configuration resources. So note by the color scheme that this is two words put together into a sentence. So configurations and resources, I'm sure you know what they are, but let's put them together. So with configurations, there's a way to build a kind of slightly different flavor of your app. There's the debug version that we all know, and I think as Andy maybe brought up earlier, that's the one that's running on the simulator and on your device over USB. The release build is the one that goes on the App Store. But what about the other kinds of builds you might have? You might want to do a test build if you're working in an environment where you have a testing team. Or you might want to do beta builds if you're doing sort of internal betas. Test flight kind of changes that up because you're kind of still doing a release build but not releasing it publicly yet, but that's besides the point. So you can create these different builds for these different purposes. So why you might want to have a different build and not just debug and release is you might want to put some extra resources in a particular build. So you might want to be able to distinguish your debug build from a test build or a beta build and from the actual release build. You also might want a different settings bundle. So if you've got a test build, maybe you have multiple environments, API endpoints that you can switch between. Obviously, you only want that in the test build, not in the release build. And also test data. There might be some, if you're doing SSL pinning, you might have some certificates inside your app that you probably don't want your test environment certificates in the production version of the app just because it looks unprofessional. And you can also, with configurations, there's a little trick you can do so that what gets built has a different name when it comes out as a .app or .ipa. And you can also change the bundle ID, which is the unique identifier for your app, so that you can have these different versions installed alongside each other. So you can have 4 different versions of your app installed on the phone, which is really handy if you need to be able to, you want to be able to test production while still having a pre-release build or a debug build from Xcode. Anyway, there's reasons to have different builds. So the regular configurations are debug and release. So the configurations are what you will be using to create these different variants. You already have these debug and release ones, but I want to add test or beta, whatever else. I don't know what you need. So how do you do that? So to add a configuration, go to the project. Andy gave a great tutorial on how to navigate this screen. Go to the project. The configuration list is in that first info tab. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see that well? And you press the little plus button, especially right here. There's also one down here, but it's not this one. If you want that. It used to be more obvious before Yosemite. Yeah, It's a little confusing. Yeah, so you do that, and that'll let you add another configuration. Depending on what this configuration's for, you probably want to duplicate either debug or release. So they're the default ones. Any new project or existing project will probably have those. If you're doing beta, you probably want it to be based off the release build, because debug has, you know, like, it has the debug preprocessor macro on, and it has yeah, optimizations, other things like that. So you probably want to base it off a release build. So you can duplicate the release build and then create a beta configuration. And so now you're ready to get started with the next piece, which is resources. So let's forget about configurations for a bit, because we haven't built the full sentence yet. So build settings can be changed per configuration. So you can select a different provisioning profile for the debug build, but you probably select a development provisioning profile. Probably seen that before. Or maybe you just click fix issue, so you haven't seen that before. I don't know. But your release build will have, you know, a production or app store or enterprise or ad hoc provisioning profile. And same goes with your code signing identity and the name of the app and a whole bunch of other little details. Debug, assertions, optimization levels, all those sort of build configuration settings. They can be changed per configuration already, that's built into Xcode. But resources, you can't do that. So in Xcode, resources are assigned to a target. And the target is just your main app target. So it's kind of a one-to-one. But what if you had resources for release and resources for test? So, I think my slides are a little out of order, but that's okay. So let's just say, let's pretend that it works out of the box to have these special directories that are resources for each configuration, or configuration resources. So we can make this directory. We don't want to add it to our target, which is this tick box here for this Nectarine app. Does anyone remember that Peach app that came out that everyone's forgotten about? I prepared this presentation that weekend. Never mind. So yeah, so you don't want to add it to your target, and I'll explain that later. I'll explain it now. If you did do that, then it's going to copy the resources into the target by default, so it's always going to be there, which you don't want for this, because we're doing it per configuration. And we'd also selected create folder references, and that will make it a blue folder in Xcode's navigator. And that just means we don't have to add the contents of this directory to our Xcode project if they change. They'll just show up automatically. And that's just because we're not adding it to a target, so we don't really care what's in this directory. We just want to know, that there's stuff in there, and what's in there is kind of incidental to our project. So here's an example of something I might put in one of these directories. So let's say for debug here, we have a settings bundle, which lets you sort of add your own little toggles and text fields to the settings app, the main one in iOS. And so a regular resource would be included in the target. That's the default behavior. But then these special ones are going to be overridden depending on which configuration you're building.
So the release configuration is going to grab those resources under release, and debug is going to grab the ones under debug. And just since these are directories, they'll be merged. So if there's a file that's in both places, one will overwrite the other. And also bundles are directories, so their contents will be merged. They won't completely overwrite each other. Something to be careful if you're doing something like I'm doing here, where I'm putting feature toggles. If you can see that over there. I'm putting feature toggles in the debug build. I don't want them in the release build. So I haven't put the settings bundle in the regular resources directory because I only want it in debug, and it won't simply get overridden and erased. And then here's the magic thing. I wrote this quick bash script. I also wrote unit tests for it. Yeah. That was an exercise. I don't know if there's testing frameworks for shell scripts, so I just kind of. Thank you. I just kind of made it up. So go to that tiny URL, and that takes you to the GitHub gist that has it. I've also written all this up on my blog, so if I'm not making any sense, maybe my writing makes sense. I'll have a link afterwards. And so there's a little bash magic here. So this is going to be a build that you add to your project, specifically adding it to your main app target as a build phase. And so the script is going to basically, based on the configuration, which Xcode passes into this script, as well as some of those other variables you're seeing, like source root, target name, code signing folder path. That's just the destination where Xcode already does something similar to this script with your resources, and it's just copying it from the source directory to the destination, which is this code signing folder path. But this one does this special copy config resources function, which determines which configuration directory we want to copy the files from. And here's how to add a run phase script, if you didn't know. You go to your project, you'd select your target, and then go to build phases. And once again, there's one of these plus signs up there. If I hadn't collapsed the targets list, there would also be another plus sign on screen. You don't want that one. And then you'll add a run phase script. You can rename it if you double click the name, so it's not just build phase script. I call it copy configuration resources, so it's easy to understand. And then I've put it somewhere next to my code, so I can just call this script. Oh, and a pro tip here is if you do add custom build phase scripts, you should really untick the option show environment variables in build log, because that just prints out like 10 pages of variables in your console when you're building, which really makes CI messy when you have to go through the logs, because it's not useful information, so just turn that off. And another tip here, if I may, is you can create a new scheme to build and run your app with this configuration that you've now created. So normally, the default scheme, the one that Xcode will generate, it'll run your app in debug if you're running it in the simulator or on device through USB. But if you archive, it'll do it for release. So that's kind of baked into Xcode to set up that scheme for you and to select those configurations when you do those actions. But you can just create your own one. So here you can create a release one. You could also create Nectarine test and Nectarine beta. You can create that, then you can edit it. And if you notice here, it says build configuration in the center of the screen. So there you can change which configuration is going to be run. If you notice on the left side, it shows these different actions here, archive being the last one. And you notice that underneath that it says release. So that's telling you the configuration that by default has been selected for that action on the scheme for the target. And instead of doing a demo, I'm just going to show that it worked. Yeah, that was my debug build and that was my release build, which I was able to run in the simulator because I created a scheme that then changed the run configuration. Yeah, thank you. I'm Ashton. I'm a senior iOS developer at Odyssey. I'm on Twitter, AshtonDev, GitHub, Ashton-W, and my website is ashton-w.net. I didn't reserve all the names like Andy. God damn it. Didn't think ahead. I don't know what my medium is. I don't use it. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you. I am going to go to this tiny URL or fail. That's all right. I'm just looking at my own slides. Internet. All right, internet's not working.
It should be amazing.
Yeah, so here it is. I truncated it a little bit so it would fit in the slide. But yeah, and here's my like okay-ish tests for it if you want to test it. Here's some instructions. Yeah, I've used this in a few apps now and it's super helpful, especially if you've got, you know, these different needs for different people that want the app. It's really great if you've got a testing team. You can put all these feature toggles in the app, in the settings, and just go nuts with chucking all sorts of dodgy API endpoints that should never go to prod, and you know, cert files for servers that are really dodgy. Just chuck all that stuff in there, and it'll never get in your release build. It's pretty good. Any questions? Yes, in the back.
So other than,
Oh, do we need a microphone?
I lost the issue of file linking to targets. What's the main benefit over just having a combination of different scheme targets?
Could you repeat that question, please?
So we're doing a similar thing.
Yep.
With multiple schemes and targets. So with a target, you can have different resources, different packages, different
Yep.
phases, each with its own debugging. So the major fault I see with that is the file linking to each target.
Right.
Merge conflicts, yada, yada, yada.
Yes.
Other than that, what's the main benefit of switching to something like this?
So I guess that is the main benefit. So maintaining two targets when they're kind of just the same target but slightly different, it is a bit cumbersome to maintain that those two sets sets of build configurations, build settings for each of the configurations, and especially because it sort of multiplies however many configurations you have, and then targets that's all multiplying into all these different configurations that you can have. And so this is just for resources, and that's kind of really what I was looking for. And I really don't like having like a source file that's included in multiple targets. It just feels wrong. So, yeah, that's why. And I should write a blog post about it or something, but I use this to avoid having to maintain another target to have a separate version of the app that's got a different like bundle ID, code signing, all that stuff, even name and the color of the icon. So with this resources stuff, you can actually include in those specific configuration resources directories different app icons. Sometimes a popular thing is to like change the color, like tint the icon so that you can easily tell apart what's your beta build and stuff. Yeah. Oh, I'm so torn.
Did you try, say, generating the settings view list on the fly during the build depending on the configuration parameters instead of using separate ones and maintaining separate ones? Maybe I'm splicing a part of the view list into the settings view list just so that you have a single, like a core settings file, and you have an extra little part of the view list that you just splice in your debug configurations.
Funny you mentioned that. So I am kind of looking into how to do settings p-lists better. Something way better than that. Yeah, I'm thinking some way to have some kind of DSL to describe what the settings bundle should be, have it generate this ugly p-list format, which is XML's annoying. No one likes XML anymore. But also so that I could have, I guess, like imperative things in there that say, if debug, include this bit, otherwise don't. And then I wouldn't necessarily need to be doing this stuff, but that would still be something I would need to add as a build phase or a build rule or something, yeah.
It's funny because the settings view list itself is a DSL for generating the UI for settings.
Yes.
DSL for a DSL for a DSL.
But
That's just what we have.
XML, it's like, right? Yeah, basically in practice, I've found that most of the time, the sort of debug build settings bundle is so vastly different from the release one. A lot of apps just do in-app settings for stuff now. So your release settings bundle, if you even have one, is probably just like legal stuff and things no one reads. Yeah, thanks, Blas. Andy?
It's more of a comment than a question, but like...
I'm not taking comments.
You mentioned before that, it's good to have beta builds separate from release builds, which is actually, I've never thought about that before.
So that's what we kind of had to do for test flight got developed by Apple.
I have a couple of like unused apps in iTunes Connect because I messed up the SKU number and
Right.
submit it, and then it's like, well, I have these two unused apps. But I guess you probably use like two beta builds for unused apps. Yeah. Does that make sense?
No. There's
So
some.
if you make an app in iTunes Connect, you can't actually delete it without
Right. Yeah.
without submitting it to Apple or without being in the App Store or whatever. It's
Yeah.
kind of just stuck there.
Yeah.
So it'd be good to use these unused apps. It's not deletable apps that you're making.
I mean, I guess.
You suffer from the same problem I do, Andy.
Yeah.
I need everything perfect in
Yeah.
iTunes Connect, and when I fucked it up the first time, I'm still suffering from that, yeah. It's still there. It's still there with that wrong number that I can't deal with. But in the real world, you can just make more and more and more. No one cares. No one sees it, but we care. I know.
Oh. Yes.
I don't need.
You don't need them.
Yeah, but that action tool is awesome.
Thank you.
If you get to master or to understand how to use XConfig, schemes, resources, build pages, you can just do awesome things.
Yeah.
Like
So
actually works. It actually works.
Yeah, so this was kind of something where I was like, oh, that's annoying. Xcode doesn't let me do this. But the tools are there for you to kind of go nuts and do what you want. In the end, Xcode's just an IDE that's running some scripts to build it.
Well, actually, I've had to reverse engineer Xcode to see what it does with inside for the whole build pipeline.
I didn't say it was documented or
It's not.
or well.
It's super simple.
It's well done because we all love it and use it, but it could be nicer, I guess.
Thank you so much, Ashton.
Thank you. I lost my mouse. Oops.
You're all gone.
I'm just going to go off Wi-Fi so nothing bad happens.
All right. Amazed that it's only 10 minutes to 10 with 5.5 presentations. That's phenomenal. Our next meetup is in May, 12th of May, and we're in the same bat place, same bat time. And the next hack night. The next hack night is the last Tuesday of this month, the 26th of April. This here is called HTML formatting gone wrong. It works in its own sweet way. We're at 1,000 Pound Bend. I had NS breakfast the other week by Matt, which was great. Just in the morning, a few of us caught up and had a breakfast. But hack night, 1,000 Pound Bend in the evening. Bring your laptop and co. At the moment, we're going to... It's relatively early, but there's still a few wines, there's still a few beers, but we're going to head to the pub. We'll probably move out of here by about 10 o'clock, but Irish Times is the go-to from here. This map, every month I've displayed it. I don't understand how it works. We're up here on the left. This is us here on the left. You go out the front and go left down Burke Street and then go right down that street. It's one way for cars. It's not really it's RAC. Anyway, go left and go right. Go down the road and go left. Thanks for coming. Tonight was really great. We had a lot of great presentations, real mishmash. They'll be available on YouTube after the fact. I think a presentation like yours, Ashton, similar to last time. There's a lot of information. Get in there, watch it after the fact. Thanks for coming. We'll see you next month.